G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan a hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, the Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting.
Welcome to another episode of the Hunters Campfire podcast, and today we've got a guest that I've been trying to get onto this podcast for quite some time that we'll introduce you to shortly. But before we get into that, Mark, welcome to the podcast again. It's great to be back. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to put one of these together because, well, it's mid-rut, and actually stringing this together right now has been pretty hard.
Literally, I was packing my gear before this, and I'll go be loading my gear in the truck after this because I'm going off. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning around 3 o'clock. And to see if I can get up there before first light to see if I can get myself a deer. So yes, we are right in the middle of red deer hunting. So
it's exciting.
The podcast has taken not a back seat, but it has moved from priority one.
Yeah, it has to. And Paul, welcome. We won't tell everyone who Paul is quite yet, but welcome to the podcast. Our first New Zealand guest. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Excellent, mate. It's going to be good fun. So, Mark, heading up into the bush, we've got some pretty cool video that's going to be released shortly. You were in and amongst 7 stags the other day. Some really good stuff on video. Restrained yourself, didn't get into taking one out with the new rifle either. So it was holding that back, mate.
Yeah, it was. Look, I was actually talking to someone about it today. It was funny. I got up there before first light, so I was literally in the paddock in the dark, and I did a quick video intro, and then I just heard them. So I just moved towards the sound. Found there's a place where I can usually sit in that first paddock, which is back against the tree, so I don't create a silhouette. So I sat there, and they just went off, and it was funny. They were so vocal, and I knew there was so much action. I almost, at that point, said, I probably won't shoot anything today. There's just too much going on. There is just too much to see and too much to experience. And pretty quickly, I made a decision that I wouldn't shoot. That being said, when the light lifted, if there was a big 6.6 on the hill, I would have dropped him. But there wasn't. It was just a couple of very nice double. It was a 4.5 and a 3.3 on that first hill. And then I recorded them. I filmed them, heard them roaring, and then went around. I literally walked away from them, went around to another part and bumped another 2. And when one of the ones I bumped that second time, that was a shooter. He was a good 5.5, and he was beamy and he was nice. And then again decided, I'll keep going, and I got to the top of the hill there, and there was another 3 roaring. 2 on an opposite on another property, but 1 directly below me, and that's the one that basically he walked up on me, and he was bow range, and I don't mean compound either. I mean he was my bare Kodiak range. So to be honest, if I had the bow, I probably would have taken that shot, but I was just. And the only reason he left was I in the end I lifted up my head above the camera, and he knew I was there, but that panicked him, and so he just bolted around. And as soon as he ran up the side of the hill and exposed himself, and the other one started roaring at him. He just kicked on. So it was just one of those days. I thought I'd rather carry the camera today, but I am kind of under the obligation that I will shoot a couple of deer for the landowner. So I've actually got to get over that tomorrow and see which one. So I've got to make a pretty hard decision tomorrow which one I'm going to drop.
Well, good luck with it. We'll see it on video. Paul, Have you been out? You've been out and about this year?
I haven't even been out this raw yet. No. I often don't do a lot of hunting during the raw. I tend to do, I'll hunt all year round, and I generally do duck out a couple of times in the raw. In the past, a few times I have done some pretty serious trips in the raw and a lot of hunting. My main hunting season is really during the winter, meat hunting, bush hunting over the dogs. When there's no fawns to worry about, and I pretty much do all of my hunting on public land, and it can be quite busy during the raw. I'm not a huge trophy hunter. Yeah. Like I say, more of a meat hunter over the dogs. So I haven't been out yet this raw. I'm getting pretty itchy feet at the moment though.
Yep, I can imagine. And after another conversation with two blokes that are keen to get out, you're probably more eager by the end of tonight. Well, good luck when you do get out. We're about to head off. Where are we? It's Thursday now. We've got 15 hunters coming into a hunters camp on public land in a couple of days. We're all heading. We've got people coming from South Australia, 17-hour drive to get into camp. We've got people coming from Victoria. They're coming 12-hour drive to get into camp. We're coming down from Queensland. So we're 6 or 7 hours, 15 will come into one location. Lots of instruction, lots of support, lots of help. Head out into public land area. It's the block that we're on is about 25 kilometres by 50 kilometres in size. So it's a fair amount of country right on the top of the dividing range. It's got reds, it's got fallow, it's got some rumour of Wapiti red hybrids that have come off the back of the farm over there. So it's going to be interesting. Lots of pigs, some goats in there. So good experience for the new guys to come in and get a lot of support. So we're in the final planning stages for that, and we're all pretty pumped. So there's lots of chatter going on around that. But in the meantime, of course, in the news, we've got elections being called. So people are trying to figure out what's going on with that and who we're going to vote for. We've got aerial culling and baiting going on just before the rut and the raw this year over here. These parks getting bombed up, and it's just stirring things up again. Why they do it just before everyone hits the hills, I don't know. You're getting the same problems over there, Paul, aren't you?
We get a bit of it, yeah. And this is a whole pretty huge, massive subject on its own. Yeah, there's been a little bit of news floating around. A couple of fairly good public land spots were bombed with 1080 just before the raw. The hunting groups in New Zealand do put a bit of pressure on the departments that do that sort of poison stuff to try to avoid it. But yeah, similar to sort of what you're saying, that side is always wanting to do more, and we're always wanting them to do less, and it's just always getting in each other's way. But yeah, so that block you're talking about there, is that public land, is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Where you're taking all those guys hunting.
Yep. Yeah. So public land over here is it has to be booked. It's not like dockland over in New Zealand. I know in parts of that there are bookings. There are ballots and those sorts of things. But here there's a certain amount of hunters that can go on a certain size of land. I can't remember the exact numbers, but
I think is it 450 hectares per hunter or something like that? So basically, like that. they just divide up. It's public land. So they just literally do a safety audit. So they divide it up by 450 hectares and say, okay, that's the ratio of hunters that it can hold at any one time.
And is that the whole time, all year round?
Yep, all year round.
Far out. So you've got to book in your hunts.
Yeah, so you come into a training session. So I'm a what we call a hunter leap trainer, which means that you can come to us and get your restricted game license certification. You pay your fee. $100 for the year, $75 for the year, something like that, and that gives you access to a website. And that website lists all of the parks. So there's some, I'm going to call it 165, 170 parks available to choose.
I think it's more than that, mate. I think it's about
400. It may have increased a bit more, but it's about three.
Is it like as there's heaps of country and yes, people can always get in, or is it sometimes peak times people are applying and you miss out, or is there just bucket loads of it?
There's lots of space. There's lots of parks you can book, but only some of them have deer. So those that have decent quality deer in them, obviously are going to book out. So where we are, 25 kilometres by 50 or 20 by 50 kilometres is made up of what we call the Nundle system. Nundle is the main park. It's got 2 or 3 other parks around it. Collectively, there's about, I'm going to say, 45 hunting spots in that at any point in time. And you're allowed to book 2 parks at once, right? So I can book, Nundle and Hanging Rock, which adjoin each other, which means you've halved the amount of spots straight away. And most people do book 2. So we're going into this park expecting somewhere between 25 and 30 hunters around us. no different to what you would be doing in DOC, just sharing the space and hunting where you want to hunt. You don't carve that block up amongst those hunters. It's a free for all once you're in there. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So like one of the forests I really enjoy hunting is the Pilliga system. And I think Pilliga holds 250 hunters at any one time. And like you'll be in there and there'll be three of you and three other mates, and that's all there is. So you'll have, 100,000 hectares to yourself. And if you book the adjoining forest, you just, you have a massive expanse that you might not see anyone for a weekend, but then you get outside of Sydney there during the roar and stuff like that. There is a level of competition. So, and some of the forests are regarded as such good deer that they actually have a ballot system. So that's a bit a hangover from the game. From the game rating that, so deer in New South Wales, and we are talking about New South Wales here only, had a game status that has been, I think the term is temporarily reduced. So they had a season, there was a season and stuff like that. That now doesn't exist. So some of the parks that are known as deer hotspots had ballots, and was Jace got onto one of those, didn't he?
Yeah, Jace, one of our previous guests, got onto the Margyle South Block.
Yeah,
has just returned. We won't reveal all his results at this point, but it's they were surrounded by deer.
Yeah.
But I understand during the ballot it's stags only. Don't take meat deer.
Yeah, and
so they have funny rules. Yep.
Yeah, and I think you only get 4 days as opposed to 7 or something like that. There is the limitations, but only on a very few blocks. And so some other blocks are bow only, and some allow you to dog at night. So they do. There is a variances, but basically, if you wanted to, you could hunt and never see another person if you wanted to. There's some big blocks that that if you want to travel to, you'll be you'll be on safari.
You'll be by yourself even at a peak time, sort of thing.
Oh yeah. Well, if they don't carry deer, then there is. That's right. If it's ferals, like there's goats and pigs and stuff like that, you'll just be in there. I mean, I've been to Nundle. Well, I've been going to Nundle since 2009, and I think I could count on one hand the time that we met someone who wasn't part of our party there.
Yeah. Mid-Raw, there's one major park in the middle of it called Ponderosa Park. It's sort of right in the middle of the whole lot, and it's got long drop toilets and good camp facilities, and it's got a big pond so you can draw water and those sorts of things. You would expect to see a lot of people. Last Raw, I went in there with a group of people. We didn't see another soul.
Yeah.
And what I think are the best areas to go and hunt in there, I've never bumped into anybody. So people go far and wide. Everyone's got their idea of where the best place to hunt is, and hopefully you don't run into too many. I've only had one dude on a trail bike come screaming past me once, but that's the only person I've ever seen. So it's a good system, and it's super safe.
System, is that booking system nationwide?
No, that's only New South Wales. So New South Wales. So public land is controlled at a state level.
Yeah.
So that's New South Wales. Victoria have probably a closer system to you guys' experience. So you basically seek access, and once you have access, then you have access. Off you go, type thing.
More of a
like it's like you basically gain the ability to hunt on public land, and once you have that, whatever the licensing is, then that's it. That's your access. So
is the licensing fairly simple to get? Like here in New Zealand, you basically just damn near anyone can do it. You just go online, fill out a form, and you basically just, what a permit here is really just signing your name that you've written that you've read all of the rules and terms and conditions, and you're signing your life away saying, yep, I know all the rules. So then if you break them, you're liable. Basically, that's really what a hunting permit is here. Is it the same here, or is there more to it?
I would say the Victorian one is more aligned with what you're talking about.
Yeah, in Victoria, you can just log in, put your details in, pay your money.
So you're just basically applying to have access. Whereas in New South Wales, it is it is both described and is operated probably more like a license, as in like a vehicle license. So there is a test and there is requirements that you meet. That being said, you know, it's not arduous, and it's probably a great indicator if you can't pass your R license, then maybe golf's the game for you type thing, you know. So
Golf,
you know,
I think golf would be a challenge if you can't pass
that's
your
right.
R
That's
license.
it. If you don't pass it, then that's probably telling you a lot, you know, that maybe, you know, firearms are not for you type thing. But
Look,
It's pretty
it's
basic.
an open book,
it's an open
instructor
book,
led.
and it's very much about positioning you. So it's actually got some really, it's actually quite interesting because, you know, it says, you know, it talks about that the fact that you know, that what your role is part of your role is to present hunting to the public, you know. So, you know, you need to do that. You need to be aware of how your perception and all that stuff, because public land in New South Wales is public land. So as Ian said, you could be there and a guy could come past on a trail bike. You could be there. And I remember once I was down in Nundle, one of the local, I think they were the Polish Club or something, they came to pick mushrooms. So, you know, you're going to encounter other people doing other activities that are legal. And for instance, the Nundle system is a pretty well-known fossicking area. So there's a good chance that you'll meet someone fossicking, you know.
Is that fossicking for gold?
No,
gemstones.
It's sapphires and stuff like that. But yeah, for you know, semi-precious stones and stuff like that.
But you're going to have somebody huddled down in a pig-like position in the creek.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah.
you need to be aware of what you're doing and who and what your, you know, what your role is, because you will encounter, and horse riding and things like that. So you will encounter, or you have the potential to encounter other public land users.
Mm.
The good thing about where the good, I suppose the good thing is, as hunters, we want to be as remote as possible, and whereas other day users, you know, don't necessarily want to do that. So that's why I think personally you don't actually encounter a lot of people, because, you know, you kind of go, yeah, okay, that's where the car park is, so I want to be as far away as that as I can, whereas, you know, the other day users have a different approach. So that's why I think you very rarely actually bump into people, because we're going to the places, and I mean, when you go to somewhere like the Pilliga or those more central west ones, you know, people don't like them. They're scrubby, hard, dry, dirty, hard places. You know, they're not something that you're going to get a big tourist activity to. So it actually plays in your favour.
But there's still some good deer hunting there, eh? If you're going to go out and work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And you guys are talking it up. You guys are making me want to come over there and do some.
No, you should. I mean, and I thought maybe that was where your line of questioning was going. How hard is it for me to get that license and come and join? It's not difficult. I had a fella from South Australia call the other day, really keen, listens to the podcast, has understood what we're doing. How do I come along? And I said, well, you know, have you got your permit? Well, no, you don't. All right, we'll book in tomorrow. We'll do a one-on-one. We'll get your permit sorted out. So he gets a certificate. He emails it on a Sunday to the game licensing unit. On Monday, he's got his permit. Like they want to process as many people through as they can. And on Tuesday, we booked him in, so he was done, and now he's just planning to get over there. So there are good animals. You know, if you want to do a trip to Australia to chase, I mean, if you're going to come here, you'd probably want to go and chase the Samba down in Victoria. Absolutely gold if you're hunting over dogs. And I mean indicators, not hound hunting. Hound hunting's a whole separate beast over here that people get right into, and you know that's an experience in its own right. But yeah, certainly there's some good opportunities. I don't think you're going to find Otago quality stags over here, but the red deer stags, you know, the reds, you know, they have a quality of their own.
And our pigs are way better. Our pigs are better.
No, that's rubbish, mate.
You
can't say that. You can eat pigs in New Zealand and they don't kill you.
They're big, hooky, ugly animals over here, mate.
I've seen some good reds over in Australia, and you know, like through media and that magazine and stuff. But that's 100% pigs. I remember even going back years ago reading hunting articles and magazines, you know, about guys bow hunting pigs, maybe in the Northern Territory somewhere land, but they were shooting like multiple big boars on these trips bow hunting.
Pig hunting over here is a different story.
Yeah.
You know, the New Zealand pig hunting is a bit different. But yeah, there's some big stuff over here. Mark's mad for pigs.
You said you can't eat them.
Well,
what's wrong?
You can,
no
but
teeth. You got
you can, but people die.
How so?
Yeah.
Well, because they eat a lot of meat and carrion, the brucellosis and various different other things that are out there. There are recent articles of families that have taken home wild pig, not cooked it properly, and not woken up.
That's right.
And I'm a colorblind dude. Half the reason why I got a dog to indicate, to track, because I'm colorblind and I like to bow hunt as well. And I'm shit scared of shooting an animal and not being able to find it. So I went the dog route, which has been fantastic. But I just, pigs are dangerous. Being colorblind, I don't know whether it's cooked or it's not cooked. So I just leave it alone.
You need to get one of those thermometers.
Yeah, I go the thermometers. I still I don't know. I just can't do it. Anyway, some people do. Depends where you get them.
About hunting, about hunting it as a trip. I did back in 2018. I did a 10-day road trip hunt, and it was fantastic. And look, and and managed deer, goat, and pig in the 10 days. So it was fantastic. And that's the thing, and it took a bit of coordination, but it was great fun. And we did a lot of Ks, and we had a lot of good laughs and met mates in camp and stuff like that. But yeah, it's the public land hunting in New South Wales. I can't talk highly enough about it because, and I think the real reason why is you're never going to get the kind of reds you see in New Zealand on public land, or you might fluke one. But what you're going to do is they're going to give you a permit or a license where they're going to go say, here's 4 million acres, go for it. And it's kind of, I always describe it, it's average Joe safaris. You load up, you get all your gear, you load yourself up, or you do what Ian does, is you draw a great big, camper trailer behind you, and away you go, and you can keep going. And because you can book 7 days, if you wanted to, you could just keep rolling around and keep hunting. So,
well, it's such a big country, isn't it? And I find Australia really interesting because it's a huge country. And there's like so many different sort of climates and areas, as you go around it, from sort of down in Victoria, it can be cold and thick bush hunting and all of that. And I think there's New South Wales sort of a combination of the two. And then
you could bounce up through New South Wales and Victoria and do your Samba, and then you can work your way up into the hotter country and look for goats and pigs. And then there's fox. There's reds and fallow, and there's foxes, and there's bunnies, and there's hares, and if you get a rice mitigation one, you get onto their rice mitigation. You can shotgun ducks over rice and stuff like that. So
when you get sick of red meat, you go and
that's right. Yeah. And if you want to have a fish, go have a fish. So
there's stuff that can kill you and eat you and sting you and.
Oh man, there's that everywhere. You don't have to leave your bedroom for that to happen.
That's just in the gun room. Yeah,
that's right. That's just
we had a snake the other day just outside our driveway. It was rounder than my thigh.
Really?
Right? It was a massive carpet python.
Oh yeah,
huge thing. I've never seen anything so big. We had a small one here the other day. I found the shed just in my gun room, actually, the skin shedding, and it was taller than me. So I'm 6'1" and a bit. It was only about that round.
Yeah.
So can you imagine what that is? Like, they're here eating possums. They're eating cats. They'll take your dog.
Yeah.
They're big. Man.
Big one will be eating small pigs and stuff.
Oh, just unbelievable. We got lambs in the paddock. That's what we're worried about.
We're in Deer and Bandy on just last week, and just above the men's toilets. When you're walking out, just looking up, there was this nest of redbacks just above the toilet. So I had the boys with me and said, mate, come here, and just steer them under, just watch out, but nothing falls on.
I've got a bitey spider in here in my office. It's a bit bigger than my hand.
Oh yeah.
It's running around in here.
Yeah, nice huntsman.
It's a huntsman. It's one of those bitey
huntsmen. Bitey, eh?
Yeah, he'll bite, but he's not poisonous.
They do give you a funny little thing when they bite you though. You kind of get you get kind of like a skin rash.
Yeah. It'll keep you on your toes. You'd be welcome to come over. We'll sort you out.
Yeah, mate, that's easy.
All right.
It's just a whole new, a whole other set of things to be aware about and manage. You know, that we don't have any of that stuff here.
Yeah,
and it's I find it really interesting. You know, looking at people hunting in America and that, and they've got to think about bears and in Australia, you guys have got heaps of crazy stuff. You know, and crocodiles and freaking.
They don't really walk out the door thinking about it. You know, we'll come across a snake in the bush from time to time. You know, they're the sorts of things we've got to worry about our dogs and make sure that they're, you know, not going anywhere near them. My one's good. She indicates them. She doesn't go for them, which is great. But, you know, you don't walk out the door thinking, you know, snakes, crocodiles, those sorts of things.
No.
I mean, crocs are way up north anyway.
I wonder if you sort of naturally, you know, you have a natural awareness about it. And if you come over here, we'd be doing things, I don't know, sleeping on the ground or doing things slightly differently that you're looking at like, man, I wouldn't do that like that where I come from. And do you think there's that, or do you think it's I'm potentially imagining it as being more of a thing than what it actually is when you're here?
The reality is it's real. I mean, every summer, you know, there's 2 or 3 people die of snake bites. Like every year, someone probably will get taken by a shark. But what is the real, and Brian Ball talks about that when we spoke to him on the podcast about the Northern Territory. It's actually the climate. The climate is your real challenge. And for us, just like you guys, you know, the climate is a real challenge in the Alps. Here, the real challenge is the heat. That will get you quicker than anything. You know, the carpet python might swallow your dead body, but you know it's the heat that'll put you on the ground. So that's what for us to really what we think what you need to give a lot of thought to is the heat, because even now, you know, it's still 27, 28 degrees. And I'll be up there tomorrow morning, and you know it'll be coolish when I get there. But by 9 o'clock, with the pack on, it's going to be warm. And if I take a deer, I've got to get him out. And that's for me, I think, is the real challenge. The heat. The heat can be, and the thing is, it's insidious. It sneaks up on you. You don't kind of realize it until you kind of go, oh look, that's something wrong, or I'm getting dizzy, or things like that. And there's been a couple of times, both in the Pilliga actually, where I've went, okay, I've gone past it. I'm resting. I'm out for the rest of the day, guys, simply because of the heat.
Yeah, I've put myself into trouble.
Yeah. Dehydrated and a heat stroke, and I guess about like hyponatremia and keeping on top of your salt and all of that sort of stuff.
Yep. So the other thing that I took for granted when I was in New Zealand is just how much natural water you have. You can go anywhere in the Kaimais and you're going to find water.
Yeah.
Like it's not hard to find the nearest creek. Over here, you go to the Pilliga times of the year. You know, you're talking, how big's that place? 500,000 hectares?
I think it's about 120,000 hectares. Yeah, well, that's one, but they always refer to it the million wild acres. So it's, you know, when you take it the whole lot into it, yeah.
There's no running water in there for a lot of the time. You might find a couple of dams around the place, but a couple of dams, you know, in 1 million acres, you know, if you don't manage your water, you're in trouble. But that's not always. I mean, at the moment we're in the raw, as Mark said, it's been up in the mid 25s. You know, at the moment, you know, typically you think of the red deer roar as a cold period of time. They start roaring when the temperature drops. We're still getting very warm days up here, and they've just adapted to the climate, Queensland, and you just don't get that. Where we're going next week, so we're heading down New South Wales, but up onto the top of the mountains, we'll be in the range of 4 degrees to 12 degrees. Right, so that's very different. You know, you're now managing cold, and you know we've got more water. So you pick your spots. Times a year, snowy mountains are snowy mountains. Doesn't matter where you are, snow's cold, and you can get in trouble. So yeah. All right, let's get into a bit about Paul.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we've had, you'll know, Paul, how many Australian customers, if you want to call them that, people training dogs, you've had over the time. Lots of them have been when you talk to Paul. when you're talking to Paul. Can you get Paul on the podcast? So there'll be a bunch of them that have guessed who you are already by the fact that you're wearing your shirt and your logo, and we all recognise your voice from all of the training hours that we sit there day after day and week after week for 14 or 15 months going through dog training. But for those who haven't guessed, Paul Michaels, again, welcome to the podcast. It's awesome to have you here, and we've got heaps to talk to you about. For those that don't know, Paul, I think your headline act really is the Big Game Indicating Dog program and the blueprint. I might have that wrong. There might be some super stellar thing out there that I've not heard of, and I'll hear about it shortly if there is. But you've done the blueprint that almost everyone that's into indicating dogs in Australia and certainly in New Zealand knows about it. You see the socials, anyone asking about how to train a dog, blueprints up there straight away, which is fantastic to see. Paumiko Dog Guide, another one similar to the blueprint, but more of a family dog style training program, and another really good one to look at. And the author of, and I have a signed copy of Hunting Lucky. So you either were really nice to me, or you signed everyone's copy, which is probably more the point. But thank you. That's a great read, and I recommend anyone has a look at that. It's a great story about all of your life as a hunter, right up until pretty recently, I imagine. I haven't looked at the dates, but sounds fairly recent. Got a YouTube channel. You got lots of great hunting stuff going on. Man, there's so much to start talking about. But I'd love to start with probably a little bit about the book, if you don't mind, because that really talks about you as a hunter, as a young fella, your possum trapping days and those sorts of things. So let's start with the book. How long did it take you to decide to write a piece of stuff that should be on our bookshelves? It's a great read.
How long did it take me to decide to write it? I'm not sure. Like I started hunting when I was 7 years old. My dad gave me my first ear rifle when I was 7. And I was pretty obsessed with it straight away. And not long after that, I started reading. I wasn't really into school, wasn't really into maths and that, but I started reading a lot by the time I was probably about 10. And by the time I was sort of 13 or 14, I was right into reading all of the classic New Zealand hunting books, And I actually wrote an article, my first article for a magazine when I think I was 13 or 14. I wrote it about shooting my first deer, shot my first deer when I was 13. And they didn't actually publish it. We sent it in and they didn't publish it, but they sent a cool little letter back and put my photo up in like how a lot of hunting magazines have a sponsored sort of kids page where they put up old such and such shot his first rabbit and this guy shot his first deer or whatever it is. They put it up in that, and then just always did a huge amount of reading and was right into photography. So I guess it was sort of my whole life it took me to decide to write a book. And then, but I never really thought I would. But then it was almost by chance, like a sort of a series of, a long series of events led me to be living in the Uawaras, Te Uruwera Forest Park, trapping possums. And it was when I was in there, that I basically found myself doing something similar to what the people that had written some of my favorite books had done. I was living in the bush in one of the best areas in New Zealand, living in there, trapping possums, seeing a lot of animals, shooting a lot of deer, living that lifestyle. And I was reading a lot of books while I was in there too, and a lot of time to think, sort of living in the bush on your own. And that's when I decided, that I'm going to write a book.
And it's a good yarn. It's very traditional Kiwi style, I imagine. Well, not imagine, I know. I've read a lot of those books as well, and it's it's just something you pick up and don't put down. It's a shame there's not a sequel. Maybe there will be at some point, but I think it's a great thing, and thanks for doing it. Why the Uawaras? To Uawaras, it's a gnarly piece of bush. I mean, in the North Island, you wouldn't find much more challenging than that, I think, other than maybe the Superjack and the Kaimais, which is a bit of a pain in the neck. But it's a very old, large piece of land.
I mean, why the Uawaras? I mean, I first hunted the Uawaras when I was about 15 years old. A mate of mine who was a couple of years older than me lived up the road, and this is before social media and all that sort of stuff. And I distinctly remember him saying, "Man, I've heard of this different kind of deer," and he was talking about rooster deer because we grew up on the foothills of the Kaimais where we pretty much just had reds, and I'd heard of seeker a lot. Everyone knew about seeker, but yeah, neither of us had heard of rooster. And he heard about it from somewhere, or read a book about it or something, and we went down and chased them around, and kicked around in there off and on a little bit throughout my teenage years. But then in my 20s, I started trapping possums full time, and it was actually a fur buyer from Whakatane, and that's where sort of the book takes place, is up the Whakatane River, which runs out of the Uawaras out to the Whakatane town, out to sea, and a fur buyer from Whakatane, Bruce Dawson, who was actually an ex-deer culler who worked, grew up in Whakatane and culled deer in the Uawaras up the Whakatane River. And he transitioned from deer culling to meat hunting to possum trapping, and sort of a combination of two or three of those at sometimes too over the years. But I was trapping in the Kaimais on all the bush edges and stuff, and I did that for a few years. But I was running out of possums, and I kept saying to Bruce, like, over this one season, as it was getting harder and harder, I was going further and further afield and getting less and less fur. I keep saying, "Man, do you know any good blocks? Because I'm running out of possums." And he keeps saying,
they get allocated by Doc though, the blocks, or is it a free for all at that point?
Nah, it's not. It is. You have to apply. It's pretty easy, but yeah, you do get a block, and it's one person in a block at each time.
Yep.
But I was doing a lot of private land trapping in the Kaimais, and it was it's a long time ago, but it was sometimes a little bit of a free for all, sometimes in places as well. But yeah, he wanted me to sort of keep going where I was, but eventually I completely run out. And I just said to him one day, like, "I'm done, man. I don't know where I'm going next." And he said, "Okay, I'll take you. My guy's about to start going up into the Uawaras, and I've actually got a block in there, because you can do that too." And he had an arrangement where he would get several blocks, and they had a jet boat, and they would go up and down. We had one guy going up and down, and they'd usually get one or two trappers a year. And he would take you up and set you up, and then he would sort of be going in and out once or twice a week, bringing your fur out and bringing food back up. And then with the part of the deal is of course that he buys your fur. And I didn't actually know. I knew I was going into the Uawaras. I knew I was going into the Whakatane River. I knew I was going into the middle of the Uawaras, but I didn't really know how good that area was. You talking about the Uawaras being one of the most rugged places in the North Island. The area where I was is probably one of the best and nicest.
Yeah, okay.
As far as a fully forested area, it's nice, man, and all the bush is open, and it's all rolling, and really nice ridge and spur systems, and nice rivers and creeks. You can basically just go anywhere. It's, as far as bush hunting and bush trapping, it's sort of the hunter's dream. It's really freaking good,
Okay.
And I didn't know much about it, and I was really just going there to trap. And I didn't even take a gun the first run. And and then I got taken up there on the jet boat. I got given a map. Here's your block. Start on this ridge, and I started trapping. And it was just incredible. There was animals everywhere. And then actually the first trip was meant to be 2 weeks, and Bruce said, "Bring 2 weeks food and gear, and we'll see how you go." And that first run ended up being 6 weeks. I stayed in for 6 weeks, and then I come out for about 10 days and went back in for another month. And I did that I started in July, and I did that till about the end of October, that first season. And then I went back the next year and helicoptered in to a similar area, and then that was basically the, well, and it comes out in the book, but that was basically the run and the rotation was once I started flying in, 4 to 6 weeks food and gear, and you do one flight in and drop off, and that was you for 6 weeks. And by then I was taking a gun in and doing a lot of hunting, and then I got Tessa and trained her up and all of that.
Unreal.
Okay.
That's a long time on your own, right?
It was unreal, you know, and yeah, it is. Yeah.
So were you staying in what, in tents, or how? What was your, or you, was it huts, or what was you doing?
Yeah, dock huts. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yep, staying in good huts. One block later on didn't have a hut on it, and I built my own hut, just framed up out of like Manuka poles, and then wrapped it all in big heavy tarps and had a fireplace in it as well. In a lot of ways, it was almost better than some of the dock huts I stayed in, but yeah, always had good huts.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get many visitors?
Sometimes you'd go through quiet periods, but actually generally a lot of people coming and going. And so you think, oh, that's a lot of time on your own. And I did spend a lot of time on my own. But yeah, I mean, that's probably the period in my life where I spent the most time with the most people.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Public huts with people coming and going. I used to try and see how long I could go without seeing anyone. And I used to get annoyed sometimes, like it'd be people after people after people, and then I'm thinking, man, hopefully I'll get a nice quiet run here or something, and then someone else would sometimes it used to do your head in.
Yeah.
So what they hikers or hunters or combination?
In there, and that's an interesting point for lots of reasons, but in there it was like 99% hunters.
Oh, okay.
Oh, they would have been picking your brains for when.
That's it. Yeah, they're bothering the hell out of you. So yeah, trying to get.
Yeah, I took a mate of mine over to Jackson's Bay a few years back, South Island. Yeah, down south. Yeah, so it was our first attempt to go back into New Zealand. Well, my first attempt to go back into New Zealand to do some hunting, and we'd just fly Greenstone helicopters out of Jackson's Bay. We'd go into the Stafford or somewhere like that, drop into one of those hunts, but into the huts. But the first time we went over there, we bumped into a fellow we called Possum Pete. There's a possum trapper that was at that hut that, you know, telling the same story that you are really. He was actually an Australian policeman that had a marriage bust up and decided to go and become a hermit. And he said the same thing. He said, I tried to become a hermit, but I'm so social. Everyone, and usually, but he said the good thing is it's very, very hard to walk to this hut. It's a really horrible track, and it's usually washed out. So you've got to fly in, which means that the chopper's always bringing me another gas bottle to fill up, taking the fur out. You know, hunters, you know, I mean, it was ridiculous. We went with all of this dehi food, and we probably left 90% of it there for him. So he was living like a king for the next little while. And but yeah, he was, you know, basically he said, I'll just take the day off then. You guys are here, and I'll take you up and show you where to shoot the deer up the creek that he called the larder. And yeah, without fail, you could go up there and shoot a deer anytime you wanted. He just knew that habitat back to front because he, you know, he was immersed in it and he was part of it. And I think that's a draw card, I think, for a lot of people. But I'm not sure too many people can deal with the solitary life that you would be as a trapper a lot of the time. But yeah, unreal story. Really interesting part of life.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And the people that, you know, there's lots of interesting points. The people coming in, and it's something to do with the bush and hunting and being in a remote spot and no TV and no nothing. Pretty much never had a bad word with anyone the whole time, and used to always get on with everyone. Occasionally you'd have someone turn up, and if I remember, like as an example, I remember a crew turning up in the raw, and I had a decent stag head leaning against the veranda when they turned up, and this one guy was instantly pissed off, like the helicopter pilot said you were trapping, we didn't know you were shooting stags, we're here to shoot stags and you've been shooting stags. But within a day or two of you know, him hunting and me, you know, their whole crew hunting and then talking at night, and you're all in a little hut, so you've really got no other choice other than to get on with each other. And I would tell people where animals were, it was just amazing how you always seem to get on with everyone, and everyone sort of puts their best foot forward when you're out hunting in the bush. I don't know what it is. It just tends to bring out the good in people. People get on well. And towards the end, it got to the point where the chopper crew, because that place was the same, it was so remote, most people that were turning up were flying in. It got to the point where the chopper company would drop people off with the people got to know who I was and that I was there, and the chopper crew would drop people off and they'd be waiting at the hut for me to get back. They'd been dropped off that day while I was out trapping, and like, oh, you, Paul, Derek said to talk to you about era, you know, and
Yeah.
we brought heaps of food, and there's some beers there, and there's this and that, and it would work like that, you know, and often they'd leave a heap of food behind. And I'd give them venison to take out, or I literally had it like in the raw where I'd draw dots on the map exactly where a stag's roaring, and guys would go and shoot it, you know.
You almost need to know where the possum trappers are when you're going over there next time.
Yeah, well, that's the, you know, the high watermark of local knowledge, isn't it? You know, here's a map.
Yeah, that's right.
Literally drawing a dot, because you know how a red stag will park up right in a spot, and that example where, and I did that a couple of times, and I was trapping on a ridge, and you go in the trap line every single day, and there was 2 stags like across the valley about 600 away, and I had a couple of plucking stations down that end, so I'm standing there plucking, and just for something to do, they'd be roaring anyway. I'd roar at them and they'd roar back, and well, they were roaring at each other anyway, but they were always like right on the spot, you know.
So at some stage while you were in there, you started taking a dog with you, Tessa.
Yep.
That was the start of the companion dogship, and then the training that came after it. Or was training dogs something that you'd done before, or your dad was into, or family was into? How did that come about?
Well, I grew up around dogs. Like I said, I started hunting with an air rifle when I was 7. By the time I was 10 or 11, I had a 12 gauge shotgun and was doing game bird shooting in the season, and shooting possums and rabbits and magpies and all of that with the 12 gauge. But it was always with dogs around. So my dad did do a bit of duck shooting. I think he did quite a lot when he was younger, but by the time I was around and hunting, he wasn't doing much. But he always had a Labrador, and he always had a couple of farm dogs. So there were always dogs around. And as I grew up as a kid, I had several dogs, and most of them weren't that good. I had a couple that were okay. I didn't know how to train them. My dad didn't know how to train them. And it was really just that old school thing of just take it hunting and see how it goes. And some work out and some don't, you know. But it was all of that experience from a young age and being around dogs that much. I knew a lot about dogs. I knew how to read them. I knew how they would react to certain things, and also, actually, it was when I was in the Uawaras trapping that I decided to get another dog, and I knew growing up that I didn't know how to train them, and I had seen it go basically as bad as it can go with dogs just turning up absolutely shocking and being unusable, as well as having a couple of okay dogs as well. Growing up just by getting a good lab and just taking it out and it just being a good dog and it working out. But never being anywhere as good as I knew a dog could be. And it was when I was trapping, and I was doing a lot of reading at the time too, a lot of books and magazines, and I decided to get a dog, and that I wanted to work out how to train dogs and train one properly. And I started doing a lot of research for quite a while before I got Tessa. And Tessa was the first dog that I had done some research, and I put some of it into practice with her, even though it was very basic and still quite rudimentary at that time. And she was just an awesome dog as well. Like the raw material I had there, she was just gold. And I was living in the bush hunting full time, you know, and I just put a bit of that basic stuff into her, and the result was just night and day. Like compared to the dogs I had growing up, compared to what she was like. And basically hunted over, as far as the dog training goes and getting into that, then I hunted over her for a few years, and I continued to research dog training and put that into her, including doing all the big game indicating dog stuff, and then getting into bird dog training stuff with her as well. She did that as well. And then it was later on, when I wasn't living in the bush full time anymore, I started getting into dog training even more and more, and researching it more, and actually just getting an 18-month-old dog and working with it, you know. And I just trialed loads of different techniques and styles of dog training, and again, just continuing to research all the old school English bird dog training, sheep dog training, modern styles of dog training. I got right into treat training and e-collars and place boards and all that stuff, and experimented with it a lot, with a lot of different dogs, and basically over time developed my own system and worked out how I wanted to do it. And yeah, and then that brings us right forward to Fly. Have you seen anything about Fly?
Yeah, I know Fly. The name Fly came after Tessa. Yeah, and then you had Print. That's right. So wasn't Print came around after Fly, but they were together for a period of time. I don't know if you've still got them both.
Yeah, where a mate's got Fly now. Sort of fun. She's basically his dog, but she went to her on a deal that I can grab her back anytime I want, but I don't think I'm going to need to, you know. Sort of usually got too many good dogs and end up giving them away to mates, but
well, that answers one of the questions I had. How transferable are they after they're trained? Because, you know, I've got some good mates that I trust that have asked from time to time whether they can take my dog deer hunting with them, and I'm like, too much effort's gone into that. I'm not really wanting to do that, but I've always wondered whether you could transfer the training and how long that might take. And I'm taking you off topic here, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, very transferable, but the training and the knowledge of the person taking the dog is just as important as the dog. So I could give my best dog to someone that knows nothing about it, and how we hunt and how we've trained and how to handle the dog and reading and timing and all of that, and I could give Print to someone, and it could be damn near a waste of time.
Yeah.
Or you know, giving Fly to my mate Ben, he'd actually trained a dog with the Deer Dog blueprint, and then got busy with rugby and stuff, and ended up moving that dog on, and then he wanted to get another dog, so he'd been through the whole blueprint, knows the whole system, he's experienced hunter, and I took him out hunting. We went out for a couple of days, and he just followed me around hunting over Fly, and gave him a rundown, and he's good as gold, you know, but he's experienced and he knows the whole system. So
yeah, and he just need to take on your whistles and commands. I imagine the way that you've done it. I find it actually quite proud of it when I go into a camp with another bloke that we might be hunting with, and they try and give her the odd command or whistle, and it's just flat out ignored. It's hilarious, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, it's only my 4-year-old boy who mimics me that can get her to do anything. No one else can get her to do anything. It's quite funny. But
and every dog's different on that too. And a lot of dogs, Print's not too bad. Print's pretty easy go lucky, and you know, people that know him, my mum can say, here, Print, he'll come or whatever. But Fly, if I'm still there and someone says, here, Fly, she just looks at me. She used to just look at me real awkwardly, just like, what is this person doing talking to me? There's a hard case about it. And every dog's different, but that's one big one. While the owner's still around, it can be hard. The owner's really got to get out of the picture for the next person to spend a bit of time with the dog. But it should be pretty freaking transferable, all things done correctly.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Not that I want to do that.
I've got about 1 million questions here, so
go, Mark.
So Look, I've had experience with dogs. So I've shot in England birds, wing shot. So I've seen retrievers. I've hunted with dogs in Australia for pigs. I've even taken my dog hunting on a couple of times when he was younger. So, but I think for a lot of us, hunting with dogs is well, for a lot of people, hunting's not something they know a great deal about, but they're interested in, and certainly hunting with dogs is the next level up. So, when we're talking about indicator dog, so an indicator dog is a what? What is an indicator dog?
A big game indicating dog is a dog that's trained to stay close and stay steady and take us to big game so we can shoot it either on a wind set or on a ground scent.
Okay.
So
it stays with you, so it's not ranging off in front of you and barking, something like that. So it's within whatever your sight. Does it point? Is it a pointer?
A big game indicating dog or deer dog doesn't have to be a pointing breed. I use for it, and Tessa was a Labrador, so they don't have to be a pointer. Pointers can be really good at it. Some pointers can take more. That's why I like using heading dogs, because they're so easy to train and so biddable. It's almost cheating compared to some other breeds. But so it doesn't have to be a pointer to indicate deer.
Sure.
Yeah. So, but pointers can be extremely good, and they have the sneak, and it is bloody good if they sneak in and lock up and all of that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be.
So if it wasn't a pointer, so what would I see? What would happen? If I've got this dog in front of me, it's ranging in front of me. I see that it's starting to focus, so I'm assuming that it's got, it's either on a scent trail or something like that. What happens?
If it's tracking, it puts its nose down and starts tracking.
Yeah.
And that gets quite obvious. There's a few different variables in that, but it gets pretty freaking obvious. And part of what we do in the deer dog training blueprint is we actually do quite a bit of scent work. And we do ground scent, skin drags, and we also do set up on wind scents. And a dog will hunt on scent with no training. That's sort of
I've actually experienced that. Yeah.
But a huge part of that training that we do with the skin is more about training the dog and the handler to work together. But a big part of it is also so the handler can learn to read the dog. We set it up and we know where that scent skin drag is. So we learn to be able to tell when the dog's walking along and puts its nose down and starts tracking, because it's quite subjective, right? Because to me, some of the things that my dogs do that's extremely obvious, I'm like, man, the dog, we're onto something here. Might not be as obvious to an inexperienced person. But having said that too, it's basically anyone can learn it.
I think it goes back to those transferable skills, Paul. You go through the training with your dog as you've put it together, and the answer to Mark's question will be different for each dog. What it does once it finds scent is probably fairly unique to that dog. Lots of breeds will do the same thing, but you'll learn what your one's doing and how subtle or how obvious that might be. Missy, my dog, she was quite subtle on the ground scenting, but wind scenting, you can't miss it. She's almost on her back legs, trying to catch that scent and tell you what's going on. And, on a recent trip the other day, we were following ground scent to a buck, and we knew that it was fresh scent because it had rained overnight and there was no other tracks, and we had fresh deer tracks. So I put Missy on those, and we potentially weren't paying enough attention, because by the time I realized she was pointing, I'd almost walked past her. She was off to my left in the long grass, locked up on a buck over the other side. And when we spotted that, we got it on video and it looked really cool, and there was a buck right there. But her lock up is more subtle than I've seen on a lot of other dogs. Okay. But I'm used to it. Yeah.
And so I suppose for me is are you training the dog to follow a particular scent? So will a big game dog follow pig, or will it follow a deer, or do you need to introduce it to those scents. So is it going to be a more generalist dog, or are you training something to, say, for instance, to lock up on deer?
In the blueprint, we go over how to keep it target specific. So
Yep.
how to keep it on just deer. And the main way we do that, we do some non-target species aversion training. And in the blueprint, I show people how to do that with a rabbit and a possum, which are
Yep.
two of our most common non-target species that we have issues with. And then, and you can use that stuff to basically, teach your dog to go past whatever you want. As far as later on with other species, like if I use print as an example, I didn't do any non-target species aversion training with him with pigskin. And I just did all my scent work with deer, and then started shooting deer. But the very first pig he ever smelt in the bush, he was very, very keen, actually real keen. It was hard case. And different dogs will be different on that. It's just a natural thing. It's interesting. Print with pigs he was very keen and curious and forward and confident. Just he could smell something and wanted to take me to it. I've had dogs where the first time they get on to pigs, particularly if it's a boar, they'll start, you'll be able to tell. And even I've never seen a dog not want to track a pig, its first pig. But I have seen them be very wary and slow down and stay close. And all of a sudden a dog that wants to range out and push its range on deer, all of a sudden he's slowing right up and he's looking over his shoulder and staying real close to me. And next thing I see a pig mark, and I'm looking at a dog tracking its first pig.
Missy came straight into heel with her first pig. She's quite soft. And she as soon as she smelt it, she was still tracking it, but she was right next to me rather than out in front. She was not sure what was going on.
So, having said that too, the first pigs that print took me to are small pigs, and it's amazing a dog's ability to smell, to know what it's tracking before it, or smelling on the wind long before it sees it. But so from there, and even if you do quite a bit of aversion training, at some time or other, a dog is going to indicate or show interest to an animal that you're not going to want to target in the future. And the key there, so in that case with Print taking me to those pigs, if I don't want Print to indicate pigs, the golden rule is don't shoot pigs over them, and they pull them away. And then if he starts tracking and I'm sure it's a pig mark, then I'll pull him off it and go somewhere else. If he indicates, takes me on the wind and I find out it's a pig, pull him off it. If he takes me to deer, if it's a deer that I want to shoot, I'll shoot that. And quite quickly, the dog will start, there's no payoff on the pigs. There is on the deer, and you can steer them in that way.
Which would be really good for roos, for instance.
100%.
Yeah, because I think that's probably where you're going to get the most confusion.
Yeah.
All my training was done up the road from home. Every morning we would pass 10 to 12 roos of wallabies.
Yeah.
And she quickly learnt she wasn't allowed to even. She'd look at them, but it was a very subtle look. She knew she wasn't allowed to. And it's great. You're going up the road, you've got cows and you've got sheep and paddocks and things like that. She just got used to that's not what we're chasing. And with the skin wind training, I actually once gave a bag of skin to the mailman and told him to drop it somewhere up the road for me. And I've asked the neighbours to do it once or twice as well. So I don't know where it is, so I can't. She can't be tracking my footprints to where I put it. I had big long sticks of wood with rope on it trying to keep my scent away. I was riding push bikes trying to stay away from it, but just to really make sure that I wasn't leaving scent for her to follow and leave a false trail. Here, the mailman. So what? Are you joking? I said, no, mate, go away. Just go up there about 4Ks and drop it in the side of the road somewhere, and I wanted to find it. So I found that was a pretty cool way to do it. Hide and seek was my favourite part of the training. Became a competition.
Every dog will have will have that lock they'll tell you that and that's just about learning about the dog.
Yeah, and like if you look at Tessa, she was a Labrador, so she didn't have any point at all. Well, she actually did over time, and those dogs that aren't a pointer, a big part of it sort of becomes a point because you train them to stay close and be steady, and particularly over time, once you've shot a couple of deer over them and they know that's what you're after, and it's a reasonably well-bred hunting dog or working dog, that they want to do it, man. They'll have a lot of drive if you do everything right. So the dog wants to go after the deer. It's ridiculous how obsessed they get with it, and but you've trained it to stay close, so that when they start tracking or winding, you just got a dog that's like the dog's walking along, cruising in front, looking around all over the place. And next thing, the wind's coming from your left to right, and the dog smells a deer out. They just stop and look out that way and take 5 steps and look back, and they're just like, let's go. And the whole attitude of their head and ears and everything changes. There's actually a very specific profile, and with the dogs always out front. And it's kind of crazy how good you get at reading it. And, if you think about hunting for hours and hours and days on end, and then you just look up and you see that rear profile of your dog's outline, and you can't see that a foot's up, the tail's not out, they're not doing anything crazy. It's just the outline of the ears. But they'll also be nose up like that when they're real keen. Yeah. And it really does become quite obvious. It's not some freaky, masterful thing of reading the dog or anything. Like anyone can do it.
A mate told me the story once about I don't know who had, but they had a Jack Russell that they used to hunt with, and they reckon what the Jack Russell used to shake.
Yep.
And whenever they saw the Jack Russell shake, they knew, and they reckon what it was the Jack Russell knew the blast was coming.
Shaking is actually quite common.
It's shaking. There's something here. They reckon it knew what was going to happen.
I've got a
excitement about the whole thing. When Prince starts shaking, like if he's in the bush and sneaking in and getting really locked up, when he starts to get a quiver on, I know, like, don't move because this freaking thing is right there.
Real close. Yeah.
So with the dog, so look, to me, this is really, really interesting. And strange enough, my eldest, who's 9, he said, even though we were watching media, and he goes, "Oh, I want a squirrel dog, Dad. I want a squirrel dog." And I said, "Well, a couple of problems with that, but no, not insurmountable." So, is there a particular breed or breeds that you should, consider when you're doing this? Is there, I mean, obviously certain dogs are better than others, but within the hunting dog or that range, for someone who would be, so if we've got someone like me or out there who's interested in this, what kind of dog would you look for?
I like the heading dogs because
so what's a heading dog?
Well, heading dog is a New Zealand sheepdog. Yeah. So in New Zealand, I do recommend that. Nowhere near exclusively, and I'll get to all the other breeds in a moment. But I really do like New Zealand heading dogs. The easy to train, biddable. If you get a strong-eyed heading dog, they've got the sneak and the point, and I just love them. I really do.
They're an eye dog, right? Rather than a.
So is that a border collie
or a hunter way?
Damn near. It's the New Zealand heading dog was bred in New Zealand by the early settlers, mainly from border collies. They're damn near a short-haired border collie.
Oh, okay. Well, I've had a border collie once. I had a tricolour, and it was the smartest dog I ever had. Exactly. Yeah, so it was genius level thing.
Yep. So heading dogs are the same, very high IQ, very smart. The New Zealand heading dog to me, a lot of them are quite different to a collie in that collies, people use border collies for agility and stuff, quite fast and zippy, and they can be pretty full on. The right line of heading dogs, they're just very calm, chill dogs, but they've got an extreme drive at the same time. just very calm, steady, quiet, methodical, very hard workers. They're a working dog, so they're bred to work anything with a hoof, basically. And that same obsession that a good working dog has, they just switch that straight into hunting, and they just love it, man.
Yeah, I always thought that when I looked at my border collie that it was hunting when it was doing,
100%.
That's what it's doing. It's just not killing. But it's hunting. There's the way it moved. Everything about it was a hunting stance. So I mean, we've got things like I'm thinking the more traditional things like the short-haired and wide-haired pointers, your Labradors, things like that. Are they those kind again for people listening? Those kind of dogs. Where are we at with those kind of dogs?
Yeah, 100%. And that's really the bulk of it, and
Yep.
I'll touch on heading dogs first because that's what I use and people tend to do quite well with them. But the bulk, the vast majority of people following the blueprint are using German short-hair pointers, German wire-hair pointers. Vizslas is a very good, Labradors, retrievers. We've got people using spaniels and things like that. But outside of, apart from heading dogs, really your pointers are your go-to, they are going to be for the bulk of people. And I believe in Australia, you've got a list of dogs that you can use.
That's in Victoria.
Yeah,
they have 3 categories of hunting zone. So it's not a license, so to speak. It's a zone. National park, you're not allowed to take dogs. The next level down, you're allowed to take indicators or hunting dogs, they call them. And there's a list of breeds there. And then the next level again is the hound
dogs,
hunting blocks.
Very different again.
Yeah, so the bulk of people are using German short-hair pointers, Vizslas, wire hairs. There's quite a few retrievers. In New Zealand, we've got a lot of people using heading dogs. But then there's frickin' all sorts too, man. And you brought up Jack Russells. I've known some great Jack Russells and Fox Terriers because they're heaps of drive and they're small, so they're naturally quiet. And if you train them right, they can be really, really good.
Easy in a helicopter.
Exactly. Pick them up and walk across the river, and you don't have to carry much food for them and stuff like that. And we've got dogs that we don't even know what they are because it's just a complete crossbreed that someone's got somewhere and just trained it, and they turn out great. 100% you want to go for the more, that we basically laid. That's probably the vast majority of it. You got your heading dogs here, German short-hair pointers, wire-hair pointers, Vizslas, retrievers, English pointers too. And that's really the best way to go, is go for those specifics. But one thing that was really cool with the blueprint right from the start is people started getting it, and they had a pet that then they were a deer stalker, and they had an older pet that they wanted to have a go at training to be a deer dog. And people have done that with all sorts of different random breeds. So any dog can be a deer dog, but you are better off to go for those main few breeds.
And that was another big question from my point of view. I mean, I suppose in a way I'm very traditional with dogs, and I tend to have outside dogs. So how do you go from a hunting dog to pet? Does that work, or is this are you making a working dog here, or is this something that can be a pet?
100%. Every dog is a pet as well, right? Prince asleep on the floor right here.
It can be a family dog.
100%.
Okay.
The blueprint, we do start out kenneling the pup outside, and with the Paumiko Dog Guide, you can combine that with the blueprint, and the Paumiko Dog Guide, we also cover crating inside right from the start. For people to do that, the blueprint is all kenneling outside right from a pup, and in both series, and particularly in the blueprint, it's pretty freaking controlled and structured right from the start, right from a pup, and that's quite an important part of it.
It's quite confronting, I have to say. If you're like, we've always had family dogs, inside dogs. I think I asked this question on your Q&A session, and you laughed at me, as if to say, "Come on, mate, get real. Follow the program, you'll be right." But
what question?
I think I said something like, how do you work the blueprint in with your family? At the end of the day, our pets are part of our family. Putting them outside in the kennel, is probably not what we want to do. And you spun me around real fast and started on the next question, which was fine. I got exactly what I wanted to hear. It was pretty funny. But I say it's confronting because we've always had inside dogs, and they're not on beds and all that sort of stuff, but they're on the floor on a mat, no different to Missy is now. But the day I got Missy home and she had to go outside, and for the first week you have to deal with howling, and luckily we're in the country. But I've taken a puppy away from its mother and its siblings, and I've thrown it in the cold kennel in winter, where we are is reasonably cold. My wife did not like that one bit, and I had to really sit down with her and say, this is a program. This dog is purchased for a reason. It's a tool that I'm going to be using to excel my hunting. And once I'm finished this, it will be able to come inside. But you've got to persevere with me. And that was a conversation that had to be had. And I think a lot of people have to have that discussion. But now, fantastic pet and family dog. Great for my 4-year-old running around and tearing the place up. But when she's working, she's working. She knows it.
Okay.
Yeah. And you've got to have that exactly what you said there. There are some difficult conversations for some people, and it's a mind shift. But that structure and control and patience and work early on with the pup is really important, and it really does completely change what you end up with. If it's just all go, no restriction, no kenneling, no separation, no control and structure early on, that pup's a real handful by the time it's 6 or 8 or 9 months old. So yeah, and that's part of why I added that crating. So you can crate your pup inside if you want to. However, I sort of talked about it in a recent Q&A that more controlled style of training in the blueprint, you'd really do end up with a different dog. It's calmer, quieter, more controlled, more biddable, listens better, it's more focused. It's just, you create a completely different thing. And like you say, and in the blueprint, we do go over bringing the dog inside and getting them around kids and all of that. And, my dogs are pretty freaking spoiled now. They sleep in, or you know what it's like, but they sleep inside and go everywhere. They pretty much never in a kennel now. My dogs have my kennel's bloody weeds all growing through it.
I gave mine to someone else who started the program. I said, "Here, come get my kennel." Mine doesn't.
And and that's the thing is, we have that principle of freedom and responsibility, and it's about giving the dog more and more freedom and responsibility as they get ready for it. And it can be quite counterintuitive. If you try and give a dog too much freedom and responsibility too early, they often end up developing bad habits that end up limiting their freedom and responsibility for the rest of the dog's life. But if you do it all properly controlled and structured early on, you end up with a nice, well-trained, well-adjusted dog, and they end up having an awesome life of lots of freedom, and they're always around you.
Yeah, look, I've always had the dogs outside. It's actually only recently with our lab being the 8 years he comes inside now at night, but I've never actually. So I want to know how that works. So I'm certainly comfortable with that.
I'll fire you the next question. All right, have you got something else? Sorry, Paul.
No. Yep, go ahead.
Say on the kenneling, in or out, if it's that debate, you can do it both ways. So we've got options. So you can crate the pup inside if you really want to do that. And we've had people like in Canada and stuff, and it's like minus God knows what, and the pup, it has to come inside. Or people that really want to do that, with the Paumiko Dog, the the Paumiko Dog guide, we do have that option there now. But we do have that option if you're an outside dog kind of person. The blueprint's pretty heavily geared that way anyway, you know.
Yeah. No, as I said, we want a pet, but I suppose I am of the, I don't know, the generation that dogs stay outside. So.
Yeah, well, this is not a generation style thing. This is about like the fact that the dog has its alone time away from people and it's out there, you know, then lends itself to it's got to sleep outside if you're at a hut in the bush, you know, and there's other people around and you can't bring it in. It's got to be outside. It's got to be comfortable with it. And the one thing that, you know, I used a lot to explain to people why I was doing it is that dog's got to be bored when I want to train it. So I'm the most interesting thing in its life. If it's running around playing with balls, toys, and children all day, and then you decide you want to train it, it doesn't want to know you. You're not fun, right? The ball's fun, so that makes absolute sense in my brain.
One of the biggest things, and that's a really good point to bring up, is the way that a pup or dog prioritizes activities, and that kennel time, sitting quietly alone, and then when you turn up to put a long line on it to start training it, that needs to be the most interesting thing that happens that day. And then the dog's really engaged in training and it likes working with you and for you. I mean, Ian just nailed it there, said everything I could say about it. If the pup's like playing with kids and balls and just all this crazy stuff the whole time, and then you try and train it, it's not going to work. But the thing is once it is a long time, but it's not either. It's only the first 12 months or 18 months or so of structured training, and then the dog can play with the kids all day and balls and at the beach or whatever you want, you know. It's that whole thing of how a pup or dog prioritizes activity is huge.
And look, I think more broadly, you know, the certainly I've noticed is that once upon a time it was actually not an easy thing to travel with a dog, you know, but everywhere you go now is dog friendly, you know. So having a dog that is able both, you know, that you're able to have it outside, but it's controllable inside, it's actually probably a great bonus too.
Oh, and out in public.
Yeah.
I've always marveled, you know, you're driving down the road and you see someone walking their dog on the footpath and you think, fuck, I could never do that with my dog. Like I wouldn't trust my dog didn't run under the car, you know, and across the street or wherever it wanted to go because there was a cat. This one now, you know, I'll go for a run up the road. It'll be fairly busy. A truck will come by me. I won't even blink. I won't even think about whether the dog's going to come off heel or not. She stays there because she knows that that's where she's supposed to be. And you know, I've never had a dog trained like this before. It's great. It's great to have as a family dog, just so well under control. It's good. She's ripping up a sheepskin.
Yeah, like you say, all of that training that goes in, all the training and control that goes in on the hunting side just sets them up. They're such a nice pet, eh? They're so well trained and calm and...
Yeah. So, you know, Missy, I no longer hunt if I can't take her, right? So it's difficult sometimes to be able to take a dog on someone else's property. And then I go, you know, one of the places that I went the other day, chasing fallow on a farmer's land. I've been there quite a few times. He understands who we are. Like, you know, we get along really well. I asked him for the first time if I could bring Missy along. And the first thing that a farmer thinks when you say, can I bring my dog, is, oh, you're going to bring your pig dog. You know, you're going to, you know, that automatically hunting dogs are thought of over here as pig dogs. And by the time you explain to them what an indicator is and, you know, what she does and how she works, they're pretty good with it. And in and around a hunter's camp, you know, all of the people that come to the camp, she's the camp dog as well. You know, she's sitting there. She's not in your face. She's not begging for food. She's not doing any of that sort of stuff. She's just there and she's quite calming. So all of that comes out of the blueprint, and it's just a fantastic program.
It's so nice to have a well-trained dog, eh? And sometimes I forget. I had another dog a while ago. I only had it for like a weekend, just looking after it for someone. And holy hell, I forgot how much work a dog can be. My dogs are just so cruisy. They're basically with me the whole time, and the back of my truck's all set up for them, and got sliding windows with grill. And so the back of my truck's really just a rolling kennel, you know. And
now we can't do that here. We can't do that here. Someone will smash your windows and take your dog out.
Really?
It's too hot. It's too hot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, you leave your dog in the car in Australia, and you won't have a dog when you get back to your car.
Yeah.
Someone would have handed
good
it in.
will come and save it for you.
Yeah.
They're in the canopy with big open sliding windows with.
Yeah, so I copied that concept. I had a big, reasonably insulated canopy in the in a like a new Ranger vehicle, had a Ranger canopy, which was an insulated back canopy. I put a fridge thermometer in there just to see what it was like. Got up to 48 degrees inside that canopy, and it wasn't that hot outside. It's amazing how warm over here your cars get up to. You just can't do that to dogs.
Yeah. So how do you do it then? How do you what?
I take my dog with me. Like if I've got to go somewhere I can't take my dog, I don't take the dog.
Oh, I see. You just put the dog on a lead, and the dog comes into the shop with you or wherever you're going, basically.
Yeah, well, there's only so many places you can take your dog into shops. You can't take them to the supermarket and go shopping and things like that. So she just has to stay home. But into places like Bunnings and wherever else, hardware stores, she just comes with me. It's fine.
Yeah.
Most of them don't really worry. I live in the country. It's a bit different.
Yeah. So you've got a whole. Yeah, I get what you're
I
saying.
know where I can shop. I know where I can eat. I know where I can go based on who will let me take the dog.
What's a hot day in summer where you are?
40.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's hot.
But it's the same. Like we're out at the Pilliga in summer, so the Pilliga's out west of Queensland, western New South Wales. We were dealing with 38 to 40 degree days that we were hunting in. Missy was underneath the camper as often as she could, but your dogs are acclimatized to that sort of stuff as well if you're hunting it a lot. If I was to go up to Northern Territory and chase buffalo and things like that, she couldn't come. She would blow out so fast, it'd be ridiculous.
The heat gets away.
And with no water, like there's no groundwater.
Yeah.
So you have to carry all of that. She's got a harness that carries 4 liters of water. That's a morning. She'll be through that.
When we were hunting up with pointers up in North Queensland for pigs, and they used to range out in front of you, they'd go, and after an hour or so, you'd basically catch them up. They would just slow down, and then that we'd have to stop, and the guy would have to water them and let them. They literally, eventually you'd walk them down. They'd go out ranging and stuff, and they'd be gone. We see a little whippy tail moving through the grass.
Yeah.
We didn't get in on any pigs. An hour later, there's a dog kind of low, and there he is. I can see him.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to hit you with some more questions before we run out of time, if that's all right.
Yeah, sweet.
So, guns over dogs.
Mm-hmm.
In Australia, we don't have suppressors. I am, like a lot of the guys here, terrified of blowing the eardrums out of dogs. So obviously we don't shoot over the top of dogs. What's your opinion on hearing damage with them at heel? If you're not shooting over the top of them, is it more than what we're sensing? Like their hearing is so much better than ours. We can handle a shot or two going off. If you're shooting all the time, you want hearing protection, and really should have hearing protection all the time. But the odd shot from time to time we deal with. How's the dog dealing with that?
Shooting over the dogs. There's a bit in that question. So are you asking, like, do I think a dog's, all things being equal, if the dog's at heel right beside you, you're sort of level, and you're shooting an unsuppressed gun, is the dog getting the same amount more or less hearing damage than us?
That's pretty much the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would never shoot over her, but I could shoot to the side if she's in front.
To the side of it, yeah. And to the front and to the side, and how close are we talking and stuff like that? It's all.
Yeah. Well, let's just wind that back. If she was level with me and my muzzle is in front, I'm still concerned about hearing, but how much should I be concerned?
Oh, I don't know, because for me to be able to answer that responsibly and knowledgeably, I would have had to have done hearing tests on dogs and all.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, no.
I don't really know, but I do know, actually, exactly like people, all dogs are different. And some dogs, Prince hearing, and I think it might be a bit hereditary with him. Prince pretty well freaking deaf now. He's not completely deaf, but his hearing is not good at all, which is quite interesting. And Fly, I had done a lot of shooting over her, but mind you, mainly with the suppressed 222.
Yeah.
I did a lot of shooting over her. Her hearing was still very, very good. She used to quite often, she'd be sneaking you in on the wind, and she'd fully lock up if she saw the deer, but she'd often fully lock up. And I don't know what the hell she's doing. I'm looking and looking, and then, but she's heard it. She can hear it, you know, and she'd lock up on the sound.
Yeah.
That would be a really useful tool. Print hasn't got that. He's always been pretty hopeless with his ears. But every dog's different. So, and people are exactly the same, eh? Some people's hearing, and that this is from quite good scientific stuff that I've seen on this. Some people working in the same environment, one person's hearing will deteriorate a lot faster than others. That's just a hereditary thing. I think dogs are very similar. I've seen some dogs that haven't been exposed to much shooting at all, and their hearing drops off quite quickly. Other dogs that are exposed to quite a lot, and their hearing stays surprisingly good. But other examples would be, I've heard of someone making a dog stone deaf in one contact with goats with an unsuppressed 243. So the dog's hearing was pretty good, and he was actually a contract hunter for, you know, culling goats for Doc, and he was on a really hard block, and he found a mob of goats, and I think he was sort of crept over a bit of a rise or something, and the dog's locked up, and here's this mob of goats, and he didn't want to get the dog. He didn't want to do. All he wanted to do was shoot the goat. He didn't want to get the dog back in behind or anything, and he did that. Shot 3 or 4 goats with his 243 with the dog right in front of the muzzle, and he said after that dog was just stone deaf. So, I think it sucks you guys aren't allowed to use suppressors in Australia.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
And I know from personal experience, just shooting unsuppressed rifles consistently will damage your hearing. So it's going to damage your dogs as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's just all about managing it the best you can. And
I think being in front this is only personal experience. Being in front is much more, you know, it hits you a lot harder than being by the side.
yes.
I remember once we were at a property, and we were in a ute, and there was a guy up in the ute, and on top of the cab they had a shooting rest set up, and I was sitting on the ground in front of the ute, so there was no way it was any kind of, you know, and he shot, and that sound was like nothing else. That was just, it was like, it was painful, you know.
But I was muzzle blasted when I was about 15 or 16. A guy muzzle blasted me with an unsuppressed 708, and it was about a foot. The muzzle was about a foot behind and a foot to the left of my left ear, and that was like getting kicked in the head, man. Like, kicked right in the ear, and I was all off balance in my ear, and that was instant permanent hearing damage in my left ear.
Yeah.
But 100%, as soon as you get behind, it is much better. It's shocking how much worse it is when you get in front of that muzzle.
So the follow-up question to that then would be, if Prince's hearing is deteriorating, he's still highly effective as a deer dog with his other senses.
Massively.
Right. So this will sound silly. Have you heard of mutt muffs?
I have. Yep.
I've considered them. I'm so worried about a hearing that I've considered the defense dog mutt muffs that they send service dogs in, you know, into active zones to protect their hearing. But I've also been mindful that it might, you know, taking away one of those senses is going to change the way that she's able to hunt. But you don't think that would be the case? No. Each dog different again, but
yeah, each dog's different, and 100% that a dog's hearing is an incredibly useful tool. It's just as useful as our hearing. I don't, like, my hearing isn't great anymore, and I noticed that in the bush. Like back in the day, bush stalking, I used to shoot a lot of deer off hearing them in the bush. You know, I'd be stalking and you'd hear a stick crack or something and go, I barely ever hear them now. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Are you wearing hearing protection when you shoot?
I do duck shooting. but I'm using, I'm using long barrels, big suppressors. I've even gone to the extreme of using subsonic ammunition sometimes, and so that's another big subject in itself. But and I've got mild high velocity loads. I try to get it as quiet as I can. I'm very cognizant of it, and anytime I'm sighting in, I use hearing protection. But yeah, I don't when I'm deer stalking, because I mean, when I say I hardly ever hear them, I definitely do hear them when they're right in front of me, and so my hearing, I still use it a lot, and that's why I don't use hearing protections, because I want to be listening when I'm in the bush. But yeah, it's a hard one, because then if you're going to use those muffs, then the dog isn't using its hearing for hunting. So I guess you're just talking about saving the dog's hearing for when you're not hunting, is it?
I feel like you're putting the dog, into an unfair amount of pain, letting off those sorts of noises. I'm just trying to be as careful as I can, I guess.
What do you do? Do you fire unsuppressed center fire without hearing protection? When you're
not
hunting?
usually, no. So the thing that Missy has given me as an indicator is time. She's given me, she's on the top of that ridge.
Yeah.
She's telling me there's a deer there. At that point in time, I'm putting hearing protection in.
Yeah.
I'm calling her back to heel in a lot of cases. I'm taking my pack off. I'm laying it down. I've got all the time in the world, because she's told me there's deer there before I even come over the rise. So I can be fully prepared. And it just gives me all the time in the world. I don't do running shots. Like I said, I do a lot of mentoring stuff, so I try and encourage as much, steady shooting as possible. So as often as I can, it's prone, over a pack. So I've got time to do what I need to do, to the point. And I'll ask you another question about that in a minute. But that's pretty much the way I hunt now.
Yeah. Hey, if you've got time to put hearing protection on your dog, I think that's freaking awesome.
Well, I'm at the point where I'm considering electronic earmuffs, so she can still use her hearing.
Can you get electronic earmuffs for dogs?
I reckon I could jimmy them up and make it work. I'm just trying to figure it out. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that.
One thing I will tell you is it's incredible, how well dogs can get on with bugger or hearing, and how well they do without it. But having said that, there's no way I would ever say, don't worry about it.
No, of course not.
I think the more you can do to protect your own hearing and your dog's hearing, the better. It's a difficult, complicated, sort of a nuanced thing with so many sides to it, isn't there? And it's very dependent on your situation and how you're hunting and what you're doing and all of that. But yeah.
Well, I mean, if you had the chance, the time for the dog, well, if the dog, indicated that there was something, if you had the time to call it to heel, and then have it healed and step one or two steps in front of it, and it's on at ground level, then I think you probably would be minimizing the sound a great deal.
There's never been an animal that I've taken with her that I haven't been able to step forward.
Yeah.
So that's not been a problem. Once she's locked into point, I've still then got to find that animal. She's telling me it's there, but I've got to find it. So I'm usually moving forward with her to do that.
So I think that would greatly reduce the sound issue.
I agree. And I think I agree. And I think shooting an unsuppressed center fire over a dog, I think I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want to get it in behind. I try not to shoot my suppressed rifles over top of my dogs. I think, as you say, getting the dog at your side is reducing it a lot. Like, it really is. But yeah, if you can put the dog on the sit and get 3 or 4 steps out in front of it, even a couple of steps, that's going to reduce it a lot more too.
Yeah. So I'll give you this will come to my next question, and this is how to retrain out a bad habit. Okay. She's been solid for a number of deer, goats, various other animals that I've put her onto. The last trip I went on, I had the opportunity to put her 10 meters behind me. When I turned around, she was gone.
Not good.
Never happened in my life. Ever.
Where
she was 6 kilometers back to camp
Holy shit.
on the trot. Once I knew she was gone, I fretted quite a lot. I climbed up onto the top of a hill. I got phone service. I sent a text message back to camp to my mate that was back at camp. That would have been less than 15 minutes by the time I managed to get that text out. He said when I got back to camp, she was here before I received that text. She flat out bolted.
Did she lose sight of you?
Yeah, she would have just, yep. So
Did
I put her up on a track and I went down into the bush and I was mentoring someone. So it wasn't my rifle. It was a different rifle. It was a different noise. She's never broken a stock, ever. So that concerns me. So now I've got a carabiner on a zippy cord that she's going to have to go on until I bust her out of that. But yeah, that was a concern. Never been on that land before. She just tracked herself back the way that we'd come 6 k's back to the camper.
Are you sure that she didn't think that you went back?
No, there's no way. No.
Okay.
No.
That's strange. I have seen it a couple of times, and it's really it's surprising, you know, how onto it dogs can get, how effective they are, how good their hearing and smell and all of that stuff is, and the stuff they do completely blows you away. But they've still got the IQ of a 3-year-old kid, human kid. You know?
And she's a GWP female,
and the
3-year-old. So she's
this every now and again, the stuff that they do, you're just like, oh my God, you know, they've still got that pretty low IQ. And I've seen dogs a lot of the time lose trackie in the bush, and I've seen them and all of a sudden they're freaking out and running around. Oh no, where have they gone?
I did the same thing. As part of the training, I hid from her on purpose when we were out in the bush, and she went through that. And when she finally tracked all the way back to find my scent and come and find me, yeah, she never ever ranged away from me again after that.
I'd be bloody surprised if she somehow didn't get mucked up and turned around, and she thought you had gone back to camp and she just went full blast. Somehow got that in her head and went full blast back looking for you. But aside from, I'd be very surprised if that wasn't it. But aside from that, yeah, I'd just be bloody careful with that.
Yeah, so like I said, I've now got a zippy line cord that goes on my belt, and because I have the opportunity to step forward of her now, I'm just going to clip her on and just see what happens next time. She's never, like, she's not comfortable with lots of loud shooting. She's fine. I could shoot a deer, she's fine. If I was to take her to a range and start letting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 shots off, she's going to be pretty pissed off, and she's going to be looking for somewhere quiet to go and lay up, but not run off.
That would be something that would be good to do some drills on, you know, some shooting drills. Even if you can step it down to a 22 or something like that, so you're not ripping through your expensive ammo and blasting your ear and the dog's ear and all of that. But work up and do a couple with the big gun too. But if you can do some drills on that, just some shooting drills of getting the dog in at heel and then putting them on a sit, stepping forward 5 or so steps and firing a shot. If they try to follow you up, put them back and just get them used to that sequence of events. That could help a lot. Yeah,
I bought a home and pulled the 22 out and started doing some simulated shots again. Again, stalking. You know, I would do it with a skin. So once she found the skin and she was pointing towards that direction, I'd then just simulate and I'd shoot the skin on the tree. Solid. Yeah. Not a movement. Not even with the 223. Yeah. So yeah, we'll just see how that goes. But I just thought I'd share that because it was just different.
Yeah, that's very different.
Mate, I freaked out. I didn't know because I had no idea where she went.
Yeah,
it was only I was freaking out. Yeah, it was only, and I had to process it. I had a mentor, you know, young fellow with me. We'd shot his first deer. I had to get that sorted. It was 45 minutes, nearly an hour, before I could actually go and find her. Yeah. And at that point, we started to pick up on her tracks. So I could see she was going in the right direction. I was just hoping she'd go all the way back and not get lost somewhere along the way. Because it's a fair haul. Yeah. Cool. So there was that one. Frank, you know Frank. Yep. Frank Magali. He's joining us.
Yeah, I don't know.
Magali, I think it is. He's joining us in the camp next week, which is great. He's bringing his dog, which will be a lot of fun. He asked 2 questions that I was going to put to you. One of them goes back to when you were talking about, I think, hunting, shooting ducks with your dad. Did you ever shoot deer with your dad? Was that part of your background? No, never got into it.
No, he wasn't. Oh, he had an old 303. I'm not even aware of him ever shooting a deer.
Yep.
And I did very little hunting with my dad. He basically showed me how to load and aim the air rifle and sent me off down to the cow shed to shoot sparrows.
Yeah, magpies and.
Yeah. When he first gave me a 12 gauge shotgun, he took me hunting once for about 15 minutes, and we walked down to the cow shed and found a possum. And he had one thing that he wanted to teach me about the 12 gauge shotgun. And he shot a possum out of a tree from about 20 yards. And you know what a 12 gauge shotgun with bird shot does to a possum at 20 yards? There's basically nothing. You can't see any, maybe a couple of pinholes. And then it was a single barrel shotgun, and then he reloaded it and put it point blank to the possum and blew it in half. And he said, "See that?" And I said, "Yep." He said, "Okay, there's the gun." That was his safety. That was his
safety briefing. Oh, I'm sure you understood it.
Yeah.
His other question was, since you've now gotten into the dog training and you've been doing this for quite some time, would you even bother going hunting without your dog?
Barely.
Yeah.
Barely. I would. And there's a couple of situations that I think about sometimes, places in New Zealand where you're not allowed to take a dog that I'd like to go hunting. I'm going to be making some videos soon, just sort of general hunting stuff that I might want to talk about stalking deer without a dog. So I might do it like that. But other than that, when it's for a, particular purpose, not really. And it's really,
you're going to drop your success rate quite a bit, I imagine.
Yep. And it'll just be kind of like missing an arm or a leg,
Yeah.
Weird.
No, understood. Okay, they were Frank's two questions that I told him I'd ask. My last one, and I'm sure Mark's got some more, but I'm going to keep going. So, sorry about that, mate.
Go for it, man.
Because we live in Queensland, Mark and I live in Queensland, and we don't have the ability to just wander out and go hunting in Queensland because there is no public land hunting in Queensland at all. A lot of us don't have access to blocks, so we travel a lot, which means there can be quite large breaks between hunt trips. Is there a specific type of thing that you might do with an indicator to ready it for a hunt if it's been inactive for 4 or 5 months? COVID would have been a great example. People just couldn't get out. Are there specific drills or any, or a dog's just going to pick this up normally or naturally when you go put them back in the bush? They're just going to instinctively get back on track, or should you be doing some pre-work?
Yeah, look, I had a similar question. I probably, to me, it was more about stickiness. So what's, the same way of saying it, if I were to do it and I might be hunting once every couple of months, what's the kind, is there a timeline here? Is there a horizon when we start to lose this, and how might you do something about keeping that dog at that level?
Yeah, really good question. There's a couple of sides to it, but really, once you've done a long and comprehensive system like the blueprint and you've shot a few deer over them, it is incredible how well it is set up and how it's just there and how long a break you can have, and they just go back to it and pick it up like, they've never had a break. And I've had dogs that have had massive breaks, 6, 8 months, a year, and they just go back to it good as gold. They might be a little bit quicker, a little bit, probably no worse than you or I, if we hadn't been hunting in a year or 6 months. Sometimes it sort of take, like bush stalking, for example, it might take us half an hour to just get back into the flow of it and slow right down and actually go quiet enough. Having said that too, though, once we've done a certain amount, you pretty much just slip straight back into it.
Yeah.
They're actually very similar to us in that respect. And Yeah, so honestly, they come back from a break incredibly well. And same with the training. Once it's all set up,
Well, the training doesn't stop. Like the commands you teach your dog, they're not just for hunting. People comment quite often. We've got these two other dogs that have never been through any training. They're great house dogs. Whatever, great house dog. One's a giant mastiff. But you open the door, they're out. Missy is sitting waiting to be told she's allowed to go out the door. And you do those sorts of things every day, going through a gate, going through a fence, giving her hand commands because people, the postman might be there and you just tell her to sit and be quiet, all of those sorts of things. I find that those natural commands, they just day-to-day life. My observation when I took her hunting last time was that she had the aversion training had diminished.
oh yeah, that's probably a good
Right. Roos were back on the menu. And I tell you what, I walked up a big hill chasing a pot of kangaroos, and I was pissed off by the time I got
she
up there.
indicated them, and you thought,
Yep, she was so keen to hunt.
Yep.
She picked up on the first pot of roos, and off she went.
Yep.
And I followed it all the way up, and it was fine. Once I told her that was bad, she was set. She was fine for the weekend. I just hadn't considered that maybe I should get the skin drags back out before I go, and maybe just remind her what smell we were looking for, or whether that was even worth doing. But yeah, it was an interesting observation.
Yeah, so you'll get little things like that, and sometimes their speed and range might be a little bit off sometimes after a big break, mainly only because they're so keen to get going, particularly with a younger dog. As they get older and older, Prince like 6 now, which is basically a dog's prime. And he's pretty freaking consistent and just is what he is. But sometimes, he'll be a little bit too keen for a while, and I have to give him a couple of growlings, put a bit of pressure on him, maybe put the long line on him and just let him drag that around for a bit. And but man, they hold on to all that stuff pretty good. And
yeah, good.
One thing I would say about a big game indicating dog is the whole modality of it's actually pretty simple, particularly for a dog. We need them to smell the deer, and a dog can't not do that, and then the rest is just control. So it's a very simple thing, but the control is to a fairly high level. And as Ian said, just in your day-to-day life, and the blueprint teaches this if you don't know it already. Just in your day-to-day life with your dog, you don't let them do crazy stuff. If I see my dog go to do, I'm like, I cut that out, So the whole time you are really, like Ian said, training never stops.
Yeah.
I don't really think of it as training. It's just part of owning a dog that everything's done in a certain way, and even when I'm out, well, my dogs, I live in town here, and my dogs run off leash with me riding the bike and up and down the beach and all of that, but everything's still done on my terms. If they try to break and take off, I call them back. And so you are constantly handling it anyway.
Yeah.
They were my questions. Mark, I don't know if you had any
No,
other ones.
I'm pretty good. As I said, I just wanted to kind of you guys obviously both understand the principles and the blueprint, and so a bit more about if I wanted to get into it. I wanted to ask some of those questions, so I'm quite happy about that because I've always had dogs. I'm 18, so I've had dogs. So we had family dogs before that, but I owned a dog when I was and I've always been pretty much a stickler for training. But so I understand the concept of training a dog and having a dog that's biddable and command friendly. But this is a new kind of this is a next spin of the wheel type thing. And as I said, I got a boy who wants a squirrel dog.
A squirrel dog. What? A lack of squirrels was the main.
Yeah, it's a problem.
But he does like come hunting with me, so we might be able to move from squirrels to goats and pigs and deer. We might be able to take him on that journey.
What a fun style of hunting for a kid, eh? This will be a hard case one for you guys in Australia. One of the very first forms of hunting over a dog that I did was my dad gave me a German short-haired pointer pup when I was about 10. and it was completely untrained and high drive and just really full on. But and it was actually my dad's friend, who was one of my best friend's dad, so as well. He took us out with, and he had a GSP. That's actually where we got the pup from. He took us out when we were kids, and we went up into the bush, and his GSP, which is the last thing you ever want to do with a bird dog or a deer dog or anything, but his dog was just treeing possums. So very, very similar to that style of squirrel hunting that you're talking about. And then he was shooting them. So he sort of showed us that style of hunting. And then we used to do that with my GSP when we were about 10 or 11, and we'd go up into the bush at the back of the farm, and my GSP would tree possums, and then we'd shoot them with the air rifle. And yeah, that was something about that was really fun as a kid. But that was, you know, the beginning of watching a dog work and reading a dog and all of that.
Cool.
Yeah, look, it certainly changed the way that I hunted. Like I said before, I had a purpose to start with, and that was I needed a dog to track blood, because I cannot see red on the ground. It doesn't matter if it's on green or it's on brown, unless the sun shines off it and it shows a bit of a gleam of the sun. I just can't see blood. So, you know, I was shit scared of that, you know, happening, and me not being able to find something or track it down. And the type of hunting we do, you know, you're shooting deer in the bracken fern. You know, once they go down into that fern, it's very difficult to find them. So having a dog, that was the ultimate. Having an indicating dog was a, you know, an awesome byproduct. And finding the program was really good, because we've got a really nicely trained dog. As much as my wife thinks that it's the most ridiculous thing in the world to have a dog that gets in the way all the time, because she's always in front. So she thinks that's a pain in the ass, but that's all right. We could deal with that. But other than that, I think if you're looking at getting into dog training, it's a great program. Even if it's just for a family dog, the other program that you've got is excellent. Look it up. We'll put the links on the page for people to go and have a look. Post up any other questions. We'll fire them your direction, Paul, and if you answer them, that'd be great. But other than that, I think we'll call it at over 2 hours of chatting. It didn't take long. And I just want to say thanks. It's been a great chat, learning a bit more about your background and your history, and yeah, I'm sure people will get a lot out of this.
No, thank you. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
It's been great to have you, and certainly learned a lot. And I think we'll post a link to that book too, mate. You might have to go on a second run or something. We'll try and get some movement on that book as well, I reckon.
When you're ready to come over to Australia, and you know, you can fly your dog here. There's no quarantine once you get here. And
it's 100% on the bucket list, and I'm serious about that too.
Yeah, well, if my next trip to New Zealand, mine will be coming with me. It's, you know, it's the cost of another seat on the plane.
Not too bad, eh?
No. If it costs you $500 or $600 return, it costs your dog pretty much the same. It's just a long day for them in the crate, but you pretty much drop them off first thing in the morning, and you pick them up when you land, and they go out and have a wee on the airport lawn, and off you go.
Is there any? I've heard rumors about big costs and testing and quarantine or something, but it's
not between Australia and New Zealand. I moved over to New Zealand for my wife and I moved over there for 3 years some time back, and we took all 3 of our dogs and literally dropped them off in the morning at the dog handlers at the airport, and they came off on the baggage carousel with the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one other question quickly is, what would be the story with me obtaining a firearm over there, or bringing one over, or something like that?
Visitor's permit. Yep, you can bring your rifle. There's a one former that you've got to fill out to import a rifle to Australia, and there's a one former to export your rifle back out of it. You know, once you know the process, it's quite simple. You know, I take groups of people the other direction. It's the same process in reverse. It's easier if you buy rounds here than bring them with you. If you're a reloader, you know, find a factory round that's going to suit you and use that, because quarantine can be fun with rounds. You know, on your permit, you say one rifle with X scope and one box, 20 rounds of Seiko, whatever. When you come back after shooting one round, the quarantine says, well, you said you had a box of 20, you've only got 19. That's not what you said on your form. I'll take the rest.
Yeah.
We've had that happen. So there's ways around, but it's honestly, it's a form. I think it's 30 days before you've got to fly, you've got to submit it. They send you all your permit paperwork. If you go through the motions, it's done and dusted.
That's it. I'm doing it, and I'll be picking your guys' brains on some spots too when I come.
No, when you're ready to go, that
yeah,
won't
we'll
be
take
hard.
you, mate. You don't need to pick us. We'll take you.
Just unscrew the can off the front of it, otherwise
That's
it'll
right.
go missing.
That'll cause you some grief.
Yeah.
Roger that.
Yeah. Awesome, man. All right, we'll let you go. Thanks again.
Awesome, guys. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Doing great. Cheers.
Peace out.
Yeah.